Hello, and welcome back to Owens Bay. In today's episode, we're going to continue with the redevelopment of the city of New Sunderland. We're going to be building a custom port and rail facility for the city, further adding to its unique characteristics and at the same time developing a bit more of its history. The area we're going to be working on today is just on the other side of this hill. And coming into view right now. Everything you see down below here, it all has to go. My name is Gyves, and let's get started. I think out of all the areas in New Sunderland, this is the least developed. It's the area where I just simply had no idea what I want to build in here, and I just put on a whole bunch of random things without really thinking about it. It all has to go. It looks awful. And we're going to be dramatically changing this. It's going to look completely different by the time I'm done here. One thing that I've noticed now that the region has developed a bit is the train station here. It just comes to this abrupt end, right at almost at the shoreline, and that really doesn't make any sense. Obviously, rail this close to the shore would probably terminate in some sort of port facility, which is what we're going to be building today. Now, the port is going to be purely decorative. There are several reasons for this. The main reason is the port available to us in game right now is just way too big. If I had access to a much smaller port, I might consider it. But there's other reasons for not building a proper port down here. The main reason is the backstory that's sort of developing for the town. My ideas for New Sunderland right now are leaning to, this is kind of like a town that is kind of past its peak. Its peak would have been the first half of the 20th century. It's still, a fairly nice place to live, but it is, showing some of the signs of a town in decline. Now, with the port facility, the main issue here is I'm going to have a mega port over in Queensport. It's going to be a deep water port, able to handle the largest cargo ships, and that probably would have been built in probably the 70s, maybe the 80s at the latest. And once that port facility comes online, this port here kind of goes into a bit of a decline. It can't handle the larger ships like the deep water port. For our purposes here, I have to use the cargo ships that are available. There are no other options, so those are going to be our props. But the idea is it's just not that large of a port. It doesn't have the capacity. So how I want to depict this in the game is I don't want a lot of activity down here. I want it to be, this whole industrial area to feel like it's not as productive as it once was. If I put a real cargo terminal down here, it would generate way too much traffic and kind of break the story I'm trying to develop. Also, it just happens the road system I have down here would totally be inadequate to deal with any like real cargo. So kills two birds with one stone using that story element. Right here, I'm just determining the actual size of the port, and I'm going to draw in the rail lines where I think they might go. This is all going to shuffle around a little bit as I work on it and figure out what it is I want to actually build down here. For the terminus for the rail lines, we're going to use this maintenance yard. It's just a prop building, so it's not going to have any function here other than decorative. The whole port is essentially decorative with a few industrial buildings thrown in just to give it a bit of Now, I don't really personally have any real knowledge about how ports and rail yards are actually constructed, so I'm just making this up out of my head. I'm going for more the aesthetic look than the actual real functionality, but if I rated something that's just completely, utterly wrong, and please feel free to point it out, and I will probably try to accommodate some sort of change to make it look more realistic. But for this, I'm just going for what looks good to me. Now I'm going to be inspired here by the YouTuber Imperator. He did a version of this building. It's Richardson's International. It's a grain silo located in North Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And if you're familiar with the Vancouver waterfront, you would recognize this building. What I'm going to create down here is a petite version. His version is just, let's just say, very imposing. It would dominate the skyline of my city, which would be interesting, but it doesn't quite fit. Maybe for a future build, having some industrial building that just dominates the skyline would be fun. But for here, we're going to go for a little smaller version, and I'm going to create it out of several prop buildings. I'm using some grain silos and mine shafts to create the structure of the building. Here I'm going to use these prop pillars. These ones I believe are from Source Design, located on Sully's Discord. These are nice. They have a nice little decorative edge on them, so for buildings like this, they're quite useful. And we're just going to use them to create a bit of a roof structure. And we're going to be using these mine shafts sunk into the ground for the end structures on the building. Now, I'm just making this up out of what props I have available. You know, how it actually functions as a building. I mean, who's to say? But, you know, making do with what I've got. I'm going to be using some prop versions of the postal garage down here at the bottom to create essentially loading docks. And we're going to add the cargo crane props as well. They might be a bit large for this port facility, but I don't really have any options, so we're going to go with those. I spend a bit of time, you know, figuring out exactly how the port is going to look, like the actual shape of it. Like I said, I'm going to include just a couple battering of actual functional industrial buildings just to give the area a bit of life, so there is a bit of traffic. But I want to keep it light. So it basically to kind of sell my narrative that this is kind of like an industrial area that's in a bit of decline and not nearly as active. It's going to be mostly props with just enough industrial buildings to give it a bit of activity. Now I have to rebuild a lot of areas around here as well. This is some neighborhoods and some office areas just to make it all integrate well together. I'm not going to spend a lot of time focused on the detailing I do there. It's not really the focus of this episode, and you'll see it in the closing cinematics. It's kind of this same sort of detail work I've been doing throughout the entire region, so it's nothing new or interesting. I'm going to try a little experiment here with the terrain and some custom surfaces. Now, this particular surface is the map surface on the, oh, I can't remember the name. I'll include it below here. And this only, I'm not sure, I did it with this map surface. It will work differently with other map surfaces, but what we're going to do is we're going to use the transparent black color on top of this to transform the way the ground looks. I want mounds of material here, so I need to see where the terrain lines actually are, and I'm going to use the fence net lanes here to draw that in so I can actually trace out exactly where the terrain starts to change height. And I'm just going to do a little test here. This is what we're aiming for. You can see how the rocky texture kind of bleeds through, so this actually looks like a brand new material, and that's the lighter version. I didn't go with that, it didn't seem dark enough. So we're just going to draw it in here, and I'm going to go for two different color piles of material. The first one's going to be this black. I'm not sure what it's supposed to be. It could be stand-in for anything. It could be coal, it could be whatever you want it to be. I guess I'm going to think of it as like a giant pile of topsoil. On the other side, I'm going to go with this brown texture. This is also a modified texture or surface, I should say, that I created. This one is a bit more, I'm not 100% sold on it, but it's not bad. It just looks like another pile of some sort of organic material. And now that we've drawn in our surfaces, we don't need the fence anymore. And I get distracted by another idea. For the port, and I don't know anything about ports, but somehow I know what a marine fender is. And we're going to use the stage to create this. So we're going to tip the stage on its side, and then we're going to drop down into the water eventually, and place it right along the edge of the pier here and recolor it black. So it's essentially a bumper for large ships, so they don't crash directly into the dock. I don't know why that's in my head, but it is. Now I'm going to show a little bit of this. I struggle with figuring out the surfaces here. There's a fair amount of experimentation. I try out a bunch of different things here to see what effects I can come up with. This is just part of the process. I'm doing a lot of experimenting with the different surfaces and decals on top of each other just to see what kind of, what I can come up with. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it's just, whatever it is I'm trying to do just is kind of ends in a kind of like a dead end. This is kind of an example of it here. Right here, these are the new dirty road decals. These are great. They go right on top of the alley roads and the dirt roads, and you could just radically change the appearance of them, and they look so much better. I eventually don't end up using this particular version of it. There are other ones, and we're going to switch this out at a later point. So yeah, I just go through this process of, trying things out here, seeing if I can get something to work. And my first attempt here, very unhappy with any of this. So this will eventually all get deleted. I'm just including it here so you can sort of see some of the process I go through while trying to figure out, I'm essentially detailing a new area that I haven't yet, and I'm just playing around with the surfaces and decals to see if I can come up with something interesting. In this attempt, I don't. And I do this a few times. I'm just going to include that one time there, but I go through it several times. I probably spent a good couple hours on that. Now also that with the new Netlanes, these came out as well, these are great. These are Netlanes for the rail lines, so we can change out the textures. And there's a bunch of different examples here. I was just trying to figure out which one I wanted to use, and I eventually settled down for one. But you can see this one here. This is one I'm going to use. The only issue with these, and it's pretty minor, is the road decals that this came out. They have a much nicer edge. It's like more of a transitional edge, like so it's not this harsh line. If these had that, they'd be perfect. Hopefully, maybe they see a bit of a redesign, but even as they are, these are great. I hate that generic color of the Railbed. I think I've always thought it looked really, really just awful. And pretty much everything down here is either pavement or concrete. I also struggle with the surfaces for the port. Essentially the same issue. I'm just trying out a bunch of different things, seeing what works. This one's going to be a bit more of a process. It was bugging me the entire time, and it doesn't get really corrected till near the end of the episode. I think a lot of it is this concrete surface I was using. It's way too light. It wasn't working as a suitable base surface to start from. And I'm using different rail decal train surfaces there, which I also will switch out eventually as well. I have to spend a fair amount of time working on the transitions between the port and rail area and the rest of the city, so several alterations that are going to happen. Here's where I kind of settle down on how I'm going to go about detailing the surfaces around these dirt piles. We're going to be using Sully's riverbed textures, which work quite well here. I have to draw the textures around the dirt piles because if I drew a texture that encompassed everything entirely, the texture would also be on the dirt piles as well. So I have to kind of trace around them. It's a bit finicky, but not really that difficult. I'm going to use some stain surface decals here to just blend it all together a little better. And I found some other decals that blend well with the surfaces I'm using here, so it creates a fairly nice effect. And here's the road decal Netlane I finally decided to use for this area. I think this looks a little better. It blends in better with the materials that are already here. I'm going to put down a few plants just to kind of suggest that these piles of material have been sitting here for some time. This is kind of industrial area that if, say, like you were commuting to work or something, you'd drive by it every single day and it would just not change for years and years and years. and you're left kind of wondering what it's all about. On this side, I got rid of the key wall and just went in for a rock retaining wall. I'm going to recolor the boulders below the water line to kind of suggest that they're sitting in water. And the bushes and trees are actually really important here. Essentially, the sizes of them kind of give an indication, you know, it's a bit of like a shorthand to indicate the age of the area, right? So small bushes and small trees. I'm going to come back and add some larger ones here to essentially, the size kind of indicates when the last time the area was disturbed, if that makes sense. So that level of tree coverage there would kind of indicate that this area has been here for a while. I thought it would be fun to add some logs on their end here to kind of indicate, I'm not sure what this is. It's like sort of indicate that, if you had a boat, don't go any closer to the shore than this. Otherwise you might damage the hull and the bottom. So it's just kind of like a makeshift warning to keep your boats this far away from the shoreline. And I'm going to give them a slight recolor. Deciding on which surfaces and decals to use here was probably the most time-consuming part of this build. Like I said, probably a couple hours just fiddling around with surfaces to figure out what actually works well here. What I've been finding works fairly well is a lot of the, if you lay a lot of the surface decals out, they have a repetitive pattern to them, which can, you know, not look right under certain circumstances. So with a lot of them, stain decals will go on top, and just a few stain decals just to break up the pattern a little bit it's quite effective. Trouble with the stain surfaces, it's easy to get a little carried away, as this is kind of my big problem with the port here, is I get just a little too stain crazy here. And I think the biggest issue is essentially the light background color it was the wrong choice. This might be more effective with a darker base color to go on top. I'm going to add a few rail cars here to the lines just to make it look like something's going on. I'm not going to add too many. Like I said, this is kind of like a port in decline, so it's not going to have, it's not going to look particularly busy most of the time. It's surprising how much the surfaces and the trees tie everything together and make everything look like it belongs together. I missed a bit of recording here, so this is just essentially the detailing work I've done on the small industrial area adjacent to the port. A lot of the times what I'm doing is just some experiments with the surfaces, and they don't always work perfectly, but it's a bit of a learning process just to find out how they mix and match. Adding a few older trees to this area really, I mean, it made a huge difference to how it all looked. It's hard to explain it, but I think it was a good choice. On this side of the highway, I just wanted an industrial building to something kind of unique looking, just to be of interest. That was the best choice I could find. Now, this was also another time-consuming process, finding a surface that actually would blend well between this hard edge and just so it didn't look so bad. This is the best one I find, and if you get in really, really close, you can still see it, but from any distance, it blends in fairly well. And I also found like a kind of like this grass decal to kind of like use on top of it to kind of blend it a bit, like right here. The end results look really, really good. It'd be easier if the train surface Netlanes here had a bit more of a tapered edge on them. It would probably be even better, but this is I think a pretty acceptable result. I haven't really used these ground cover decals yet for too much. They're a bit of an odd shape. They worked pretty well there. Also, with the Netlanes, we now have some custom paths, and I'm going to use these to kind of fill in this, what essentially is this kind of transitional area. It's not really a park. It's just some land that's not being utilized for anything, but over the years, people walking through it have created pathways. Imagine they'll cross the railroad tracks there. And one possible reason why this chunk of land is not being used for anything, it is maybe a bit too wet. So we're going to put in a little pond to represent that. And I thought it would be important to include a walkway over the tracks to get the other side. On the other side here, there's going to be a bit of an office park. So obviously people from the rapid transit system and the rail line would want to get across to the other side. An easy way to do that made sense. I'm going to use Harbour Master J's stairs here to kind of imply that this is actually a stairwell. It's too steep to walk up and down, so this really does sell the effect. And it's a bit dodgy getting it to line up properly, but from a distance, it looks just fine. we could assume that this is actually owned by the Railyard and is just not developed. I just can't get over how good these surfaces look. They're so much better than the vanilla train surfaces. It's just night and day. Like I said, there's going to be certain areas on the map here that I'm going to be working on that I'm not really going to show a lot of. Here I'm rebuilding this small neighborhood. I'm not going to show too much of it. It's detailing work that I've shown many times in other videos, and it's not the, like I said, it's not the main focus of this particular episode. I have this elevated road going across the rail yard, and it's quite low to the rail yard. And in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, there's going to be some sort of fence or something along the overpass to keep people from throwing things into the rail yard or even jumping into the rail yard. So that's what I'm trying to attempt here. I think it turns out okay. It's probably not perfectly aligned. I could have maybe spent a bit more time on that, but from any distance, it looks totally okay. I can't tell you how many times I accidentally deselected all these fence pieces and then had to go back and individually select each one again, and trying to do that on top of a whole stack of decals underneath is quite the challenge. I'm using a different path surface here just to try it out, see what it looks like. Not sure if it's one of my favorites. It works. I can think of several situations where this would be a good choice. I actually put in a fair number of paths during this build, and some of them were surprisingly, some of them were used a lot more than I was anticipating. I'm not really sure what this neighborhood's about. It's just like it's right on top of an industrial area overlooking a port, so I'm not sure what kind of neighborhood it is. Now here, I don't know, I just got this idea in my head that I needed to build something up here right along the highway. Looks pretty aggressive. Once I have all the buildings in place and smooth it all out and put all the trees back, it actually looks like it doesn't really look much different than how it started, which I think is great. I thought these UK buildings would be kind of fun, just peeking out above the tree line overlooking the bridge and the bay. Unfortunately, they tend to vanish on occasion, which is rather annoying. I think you'll see that in the cinematics. I didn't want to put trees everywhere, so I'm going to switch it up a bit here with kind of a grassy, dry, grassy hill. I don't know why, but I got this idea that I needed to put something here. Don't know what this is supposed to be. It's just I'm imagining it's the foundation for some old building that used to sit here, and the foundation is the only thing left. Just to give a little bit of visual interest, but then also a sense of an unknown history. Like these people walking by down here, they might not have any idea why this is here, but it's like from probably the early 20th century or something. These stone wall decals are amazing. They instantly transform this into something really, really good. I would have loved to put graffiti all over this as well, but unfortunately the stacking order for the decals, the graffiti doesn't show up on this, so it's just going to be a stone foundation. And at this point, I finally kind of decided on what I'm going to do for the surfaces for the port. I like this gravel track bed so much, I'm just going to use it over the entire thing. And I think it turns out much better than this mess I have going on right down here. Now these track beds are for double tracks, but I found if you line it up just perfectly, put the single track right smack dab in the middle, it also works for single tracks. It's just you get a bit of a wider surface. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Once again, if you've stuck around to the very end, thank you. Great to know people are still watching. Anyway, I will see you all next time. Bye. So, surprise build. What happened was, as I was editing this, the Eastern European pack came out, and as soon as I saw this building, I'm like, okay, that has to go right here. So, I'm just going to quickly add it in. I'll spend a bit of time detailing it up, and you will see that in the cinematics. Okay, bye for real now.